This is one of my favorite events, and it is such a joy and a privilege to be back, and to see so many other people enjoying it too. So I am at heart an engineer, but now, like Mary said, I mainly run engineering teams. And so since the end of last year, I've been running the mobile team at Automattic, where we work mainly on WordPress. And it's a 28-person team, so things have got super meta for me, and I manage managers now. And so when people talk about engineering management, we talk about herding cats. So I found this quote about being an engineering manager. A man who carries a cat by the tail learns something he can learn in no other way. But you know, Mark Twain is a little dated because women can traumatize cats too now. And I really like to think about raccoons rather than cats, you know, because raccoons are cuter, smarter, and much more inclined to wash things. But, you know, like cats, raccoons do what they feel, and sometimes that is awesome. This raccoon is just everything I want to be in life, right? She is riding a crocodile, she is adorable and badass, she is just like life goals, you know? But sometimes it's not awesome, so like this raccoon is stuck, you know, poor little guy. But, you know, this raccoon, like, he is trying to live his best life. He is trying to break into a tank. It's just really hard to break into a tank, and so now he's stuck. And, you know, maybe all he needed was someone to say to him, like, hey, buddy, I get that you want to drive a tank, and obviously that would be awesome. But, you know, that hole is pretty small, so have you thought about riding a crocodile instead? So how many of you work on mobile? Oh my God, some of my people, let's talk after. So mobile teams are often described as special snowflakes and, you know, not in the most complimentary way. And, you know, on the other side of that, mobile teams often feel like the rest of the organization just doesn't get it, you know? And so my goal today is to help you understand some of the particular challenges of native development. And there are like a lot of think pieces on the internet, mostly on Medium. It's better blogs on WordPress.com. And they will offer you a silver bullet that will fix your engineering team. And you know, for mobile teams, these silver bullets are normally React Native and product pods. So let's take a moment to talk about why React Native is probably not the answer to whatever problem your mobile team is currently facing. I mean, it might be if your problem is you want to write your very standard iOS UI code in JavaScript. But probably not if you're doing anything interesting, and especially not on Android, because you run into these really bad performance problems. So React Native is a technical solution to a social problem, and it turns out that the social problems of Facebook are mostly not found elsewhere. So I'm not going to offer you any silver bullets today. I'm going to talk about predictability, prioritization, connectedness, automation, and accountability. So on a predictable team, there's a regular cadence. You know, the team can set goals and expectations around when things will ship. But the challenge we have on mobile is that we ship compiled code. And, you know, most advice about improving velocity talks about continuous delivery. It's like, ship constantly, as many times a day as you can, and if you break prod, just like roll back because like YOLO. It's just not quite as simple in the App Store, you know. An early build of the like very anticipated Gmail for iOS broke notifications, and this awful error message popped up every time people like opened the app. And you know, they actually pulled it from the store. And I worked next to that team at the time, and I remember it like viscerally. So things have really improved since 2011. We have better continuous integration, and you know, we know which build is signed with which certificate. The App Store's improved too. Wait times are shorter. You can expedite an emergency bug fix. You know, Google Play even has staged rollout, although iTunes still doesn't. But you cannot roll back on the iTunes Store or on Google Play. With auto update, it's easy to think that everyone got the latest version, but this is just not true. Like, people can turn it off. They can be selective about when they update, or they can also just go several days without connecting to Wi-Fi. You know, we have to remember that the typical tech worker on their high-end device with fast internet at home and at work, they're just not typical. And so the worst-case scenario has got less bad, but ultimately it remains the same. There is no lol that time I broke pod for 2 minutes story. There is just a frantic patch and test and release, and like the impatient waiting. And whilst you're waiting, your users who you would never normally hear from are like writing you App Store reviews where they talk about how incompetent they are and say that you should be fired and sometimes offer physical violence. So one small mistake, several hours to fix, and then months of trying to rebuild your App Store rating. And this is why a predictable release cycle is at the core of a healthy mobile team. But this is not just about the decision to release on whatever cadence, but about everything that goes into it. How do you build confidence in that release? You know, automated testing, manual QA, internal users who actually use it, beta users who you actually communicate with. And then you have to commit to the release train, because the thing that will most easily derail your release cycle is trying to stick things into it because you don't want them to wait. And this is why an effective release cycle is 1, short, and 2, rigid. Short, because people are more willing to wait if they don't have to wait long, and rigid, because patching things in and hoping for the best will result in a delayed and buggy release. You might get away with it once or twice, but not every time, and ultimately breaking the rules undermines them. So a common complaint about mobile teams is that they're slower. And mainly, this isn't about how writing code is slower, but that releasing it to the world is. You know, even with a very rigid 2-week release cycle, code can be around for up to a month before it goes out in the world. You know, a PR review takes a little longer, it misses the train, and you know what, you've got another 2 weeks to wait. So a regular release cycle means that you can communicate when those changes will be out in the world. And a regular release cycle means that leadership and your users, like, they see improvements regularly, and even if it's not their pet one, they know that it's coming. I don't really believe in deadlines. I believe in prioritization, scope, and regular releases. And I do believe in goals. An effective team can set themselves goals and meet them. But it's really hard to achieve goals surrounded by chaos, which is why the rhythm of a regular release cycle really helps. And beyond that, prioritizing what's important and why, and scoping what's a unit of measurable improvement go a long way. And these things, they're not rocket science, but they require much of the same discipline that keeping the release cycle regular does. A commitment to the realistic and being willing to say no. So a team that's clear on priorities, if you ask people what's most important and why, they can answer you. But you know, leadership's often dominated by iOS users, and it's easy for Android to feel like an afterthought. So if you ask a person on your team what your top priority is and why, can they tell you? Can they tell you why? Can they talk about how their work fits into it, or if it doesn't? You know, do your actions and the actions of leadership around you align with your top priority? And do your team priorities align with your company priorities? So the challenge of team priorities is not deciding what they should be, but deciding what comes first and being consistent with your actions such that they align with that. So a sustainable product has both growth and retention, but because mobile is growing and desktop is stagnating, your mobile experience, and this includes the web too, needs to effectively onboard new users. But app downloads are declining, because the era of there's an app for that is over. Like, of course there's an app for that, but does it merit the space it would take up on my phone? Your app users, these are your engaged users. They have made it past onboarding. They know what it's for. How do you maintain that engagement? So different products have different priorities, but it's important to consider both your new user experience and your existing user experience. Over time, to be sustainable, you have to have both. If you onboard people into a bad and broken experience, you will drive them away and you will never get them back. But you do need to focus on your onboarding experience in order to grow. So there were 2 apps that I've abandoned for cause, Nike Fuel and Duolingo. And they're both gamification apps. And the same thing happened on both of them. They lost my streak. The Nike Fuel was hardware failure, and Duolingo was bad offline. And another example of that is actually WordPress. A long time before I worked at Automattic, I was writing something on my iPad, and it lost my post. And I never forgave it. I went to writing in the Notes app instead. People complain a lot, and technology is fallible. But whatever your product, you have to understand what your UX catastrophe is. For a writing app, it is absolutely content loss. And for a gamification app, I would say it's unfair losing. So what comes first is a balance between company and team and the various possible focuses. New users, existing users, money, and growth. And there can only be one top priority, but this doesn't normally mean that the team only does one thing. Every team has to balance maintenance and feature work. You can't normally say no to everything other than your top priority, but you have to say no enough that your top priority has space to succeed. So priorities need to be communicated frequently with reasons and progress. And you communicate priorities when you say no to things, and you communicate priorities in how you spend your time. I like to use data to tell a story, because if you measure something, you can use that measurement as an indicator of success. But since you manage what you measure, you need to consider that holistically, and using multiple metrics can make it less likely that that's gained. So the top priority of my team right now is a project called Open Sesame. And we communicate why it's a priority using two main pieces of data. The first is user success rate with this action, and the second is support volume from users trying to achieve this action. And these two numbers show up every time we talk about it. They show up in our bi-monthly what are we doing post, they show up in our what this project is post, and I bring them up every time we talk about them. And then user testing videos of users struggling to complete this action, they really round the data out and help engineers empathize with the people that our product is currently failing. It is really important to align your actions with priorities. I started managing a designer this year for the first time ever, and I had no idea how to manage a designer, so guess what? I screwed up. And the way that I screwed up was I was periodically asking him to weigh in on certain things that I really thought were small, whilst he tried to execute on Project Open Sesame. And so it turns out that the things I thought were the design equivalent of code review were a lot more work than I ever imagined. And so as I paid attention, I started to notice this, and also he just told me it was stressing him out. And so we aligned his work better so that we could let things that are not the top priority wait for now. And one thing that can be a challenge for mobile teams is that right now, Android is the largest and the growth platform. And depending on what you're building in your market, it might not be your biggest platform, but it's definitely an important one. And if you talk about why Android is important, but you only file iOS bugs, people will get the message that iOS is more important, whatever it is that you say. So on a connected team, people work together and take an interest in each other. And this does not mean that everybody has to be friends, just that they're friendly. But the problem is that we lack a clear model for mobile infrastructure. And that's why we have these discussions about mobile team versus pods. And regardless on what your org looks like, a mobile team, product pods, some new thing that has not yet been think-pieced on Medium, you have a challenge of connection. And in a dedicated mobile team, how do mobile engineers connect with the engineers working on front-end features? Or the engineers developing the API? Was the API written with mobile in mind, or does it work on someone else's machine? And often the answer to this is product pods, right? Which is great, because people have been known to build an API that actually works well for mobile that way. But a good app is not just a collection of features. It is an architected thing. It has components that are shared throughout it, some notion of user identity, a networking layer, a database. And ideally, it follows some standard patterns that are going to get really radical here, possible to write unit and integration tests for. It's also going to need to be mindful of memory management, because mobile is a constrained experience, not just by screen size. So the first raccoon says to the second raccoon, I've split the application up into 7 microservices. And the second raccoon says, so you have 7 teams that hate each other? And the first raccoon says, how did you know? Now, this is not a good way to run any team, but there is no microservices architecture for mobile. Regardless of what your team looks like, people are going to get really wild here, talk to each other. And when you organize teams to better facilitate one kind of communication, you make the other kind harder. And there is no way for one team's architectural decisions not to affect the rest of the people working on your app. And bonus, we're still evolving our architecture and standards for how to build complex mobile applications. There's not currently the concept of a mobile infrastructure engineer. Most great mobile engineers are a lot more product-focused. So, move to Viper behind schedule, only half your iOS app in Swift, and networking layer written 4 years ago or so, not holding up so well. But, we can't make people like each other, so, now what? Well, the best way to get 2 teams to fight is to give them conflicting incentives. So incentivize one team to ship as many features as fast as they can, and another team to maintain 0 crashes and just get some popcorn. It's going to be a good show, if you're a monster. Now, if you incentivize one team to move metrics around user engagement and another team to maintain sustainable execution, it's probably going to look a lot less like robot wars and a lot more like a functional work environment. If your app is badly architected, everyone is going to pay for that every day. If your networking code is a mess, it is going to bleed through your entire application. If you invest in the things that make everyone more productive, it's probably going to make everyone more productive. But these things are often harder to explain to product and business. But every team should have some maintenance time, and the thing is to be strategic about how you use it. And the easiest way to build relationships quickly is to unite against a common enemy. This is a short-term strategy and not conducive to long or medium-term good work environments. Your team is not just the one denoted by the org chart. A team is a group of people who work together to achieve a shared goal. So ignore the org chart for a moment and think about something you're trying to achieve. Who is on your team? And who do you need on your team to be successful? Now reach out to them. So let's talk about automation. Maybe that seems like an out-of-place thing in this talk, like predictable, prioritized, connected, accountable. These are like fuzzy people things, right? And automation sounds like more fun, like proper developer work. But automation is kind of like documentation, but developers might actually write it. So without automation, it's really easy to have random esoteric things that nobody knows how to do, or very few people know how to do. It's harder for other people to take over processes like builds, and a lot of time gets spent on manual processes that are pretty straightforward. And either stuff gets missed because it's done inconsistently, or it's just a waste of people's time. So what can we automate? Automate builds. Seriously, if you commit to predictable releases, you will end up automating your builds. Because otherwise, it's just too painful. And this includes things like scripting, translations, and stuff like that. There's a chicken and egg problem here because sometimes the pushback on regular releases is that there isn't enough automation. But pro tip, nothing is more motivating to automation than committing to the release cycle and just feeling that pain. Write tests. I cannot believe that it's 2017. I'm still trying to convince people tests are a good idea. Although, there are a lot of things I can't believe about 2017. So one of my current work hobbies is replying to GitHub threads where there's very clear testing instructions for reviewers and saying, this would make a good automated test. Other common GitHub comments from me include, please add some tests, and I like these tests because positive reinforcement is important. Mary told me so. Now, it's really important to note that testing is not just a question of writing tests, but having an architecture that makes testing possible. Add linting. I believe in style guides. And the main purpose of a style guide is this. We have a style guide so that we never discuss it again. I once witnessed a centi-thread argument, all these men, by the way, arguing about whether it should be var equals constant or constant equals var. Who has time for that? Have a style guide, automate it so that Android Studio and Xcode apply it automatically so that your code review shows deviation so that your reviewers don't have to. When code review is done well, it is a really great tool for collaboration. But in a dysfunctional environment, it is one of the first places that conflict will show up. And one positive, but let's be clear, insufficient step towards productive code review is eliminating nonsense arguments about spacing. So tooling on mobile is still behind, but it is getting better. And things can be a bit more painful but to set up, especially. But if you invest that time, it does pay off. And part of it is having that time. When everything is frantic, there's no time to automate painful things to make them less painful. And of course, the anti-pattern of automation is over-automation. I'm sure you have worked with people, maybe some of you have been that person, who craft some elaborate system that only they can use to solve some very minor problem that only they can see. And pragmatically with automation, starting by the most painful or tedious, hard to socialize things and making them better is a really good start. So on an accountable team, people can have expectations of each other, and this includes leadership. But often the other things that we've talked about result in mobile teams being a bit disconnected. Server-side changes can break the apps, and then mobile engineers take the heat from users and leadership. And this can lead to resentment, which makes accountability really hard. And accountability comes last because it builds on everything else. Being erratic undermines accountability because the chaos can always be blamed. And lack of prioritization undermines accountability because who's to say what was most important? On a disconnected non-team, who even is accountable? And like, for what? And the less a team is automated, the more crucial but repetitive things can just fall through the cracks. And now, if you want to hold someone accountable, assuming you're not a sociopath, it really needs to be clear what you're holding them accountable for. But you individually holding people accountable just doesn't scale. And in a healthy team, people will hold each other accountable and hold themselves accountable to the team. So the worst manager I ever had, he hid deadlines and like concealed missing deadlines until, unsurprisingly, both the product and the team were killed. And one time I told him that I was worried because we'd missed a deadline, and his response was, "What deadline? There was no deadline." I don't think you can really appreciate the blankness of my expression. It was very blank. Anyway, so it made it impossible for other people to know what was going on because he discouraged all communication that wasn't to him. And no one on the team could really hold anyone else accountable because no one knew what was going on. It was kind of farcical, but the best way to know that there was a deadline is that when they happened, the tech lead would disappear. So one time he disappeared for 3 days to search for his cat. And so we had this meeting about why the team was a disaster and couldn't ship anything. And this tech lead, he made subtle digs at one of the other guys on the team. And then he said something super inappropriate to me, and it was a very gendered interaction. So everyone sat there quietly and told me later that they were appalled. Now, my manager was in that meeting, but he didn't handle it. And I told him that I wasn't okay with it, expecting him to do something. And he told me that I should deal with it myself. He never said this with minor comments, by the way. Those he took under advisement. But when it was this bad, it was like, yeah, Kate, you should deal with that. So, this is probably what we should expect from a guy who dealt with deadlines by pretending they didn't exist. So anyway, I got this dude one-on-one, and I told him, everything he'd done to annoy me in the previous 6 months, why what he'd just done was so messed up, and then I shared with him my conclusion, which was that he had no leadership skills. So you may be surprised to learn that this didn't go well. And in my defense, I was right. This guy spent 4 months reinventing how to architect an Android app. He spent 8 months doing UI polish with a constant time estimate of 2 weeks before he eventually shipped. And, the project he led was a disaster, and when that was clear, he disappeared for 3 days to search for a cat. Somebody really needed to tell him in a more tactful way, because Mary's right there judging me, that he was doing terribly at his job, but I was not the right person to do it. Firstly, I was furious, and secondly, I was trying to hold him accountable for something he hadn't agreed to be accountable for on a team with no culture or norms of accountability. And I was starting not with a small thing, but with a major crisis thing. And this isn't how you start building a culture of accountability. It's not when you, like that manager, go, wow, I don't want to deal with that. You have to start smaller. So first, you hold yourself accountable. And second, you encourage people to own up, and you create space for them to do so. And third, you create ways for team members to hold each other accountable. So when we move into leadership, it's really easy for our work to become less visible. The output is the team, it's no longer individual. And good leadership and management are both a lot of work, but often it's nebulous and much harder to surface. If our work is too visible, it's pretty likely that we're either doing the wrong thing or we're taking credit for stuff done by the entire team. And often we demonstrate accountability one-on-one. We set one-on-one meetings, and we show up to them. And we listen to what people say, and we follow up on it, even if we can't fix the problem right now. And so now my work is more meta. I write an internal blog post every week where I share how I spent my time and sometimes the more nebulous things that I'm just thinking about. And when I was a manager of ICs, I used to post my stand-up every day, the same as everyone else. And sometimes it's just one-on-ones, code review. But I find being transparent about how I spend my time goes a long way, even if my outputs are not quite as clear anymore. And you can't make somebody hold themselves accountable, but you can encourage accountability. And I think stand-up is such a great tool for this. And I really love written stand-ups in Slack. Stand-up forces someone to start the day with some kind of intention about what they hope to achieve. And you can also invite accountability by asking people to share what they hope to get done over a longer period and giving them the opportunity to surface when things don't go to plan. You can also invite accountability by asking questions before giving feedback, because it's much more powerful when somebody owns up to what they need to do better than when you tell them. So code review done well is such a good entry point into peer accountability, because this is when people look at each other's work and ask hard questions and give feedback. But how do you get accountability outside of code review? Well, a lot of that is about encouraging a non-judgmental space, where people can be open about what hasn't gone to plan, because there is nothing more toxic to a culture of accountability than blame. Only when people feel like they can own up to each other and ask questions without fear of seeming judgmental will they ask those questions. And so the big thing I want you to take away is this overarching idea of thinking in the medium term, because short-term thinking comes back to bite us too quickly, and long-term thinking optimizes for a future that we're probably never going to get to. And a lot of what I've covered here is about mindful investment in the important rather than the perfection of everything, in what we build and in how we go about it. And this is also about doing the hard thing. There are no silver bullets, because a team is a complex system and everything affects everything else. And so I'm going to wrap up with 2 observations that I regularly make to newer managers who are finding things hard. And the first is, congratulations on not being a sociopath. And so a lot of hard things, hard conversations, hard decisions where you have to disappoint somebody, these are hard, and there's a limit to how easy they should be. If things are hard, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be doing them or that you're doing them wrong. It might just mean that you're not a sociopath. And the second is, this is why most teams are dysfunctional, because most people don't do this work. So this has been a soft talk, and by the way, I hate that phrase because humans are so much harder than machines. But it has also been a works on my machine talk. The thing that I have not touched upon is the amount of work that I have done on myself to be the kind of person who can serve my team to this extent. Coaching, the amount of time I spend in the gym, and friends and mentors, many of whom will be or have been on this stage. The incredible Mary, who curates this entire event, and the extraordinary Kay Wu, who spoke this morning, my BFF Jill, who will be giving an amazing talk tomorrow, and Lara, of course, who's going to be giving a talk tomorrow, and my adored Duetti, she gave a fantastic talk last year, and finally, of course, Camille, who I missed so much this year. So if you also miss Camille, please send her a picture of a raccoon so that she knows that we love her. So this work is really emotionally hard and draining, and the easiest way to set yourself up for failure is not to take care of yourself and not be able to sustain it. Because healthy teams are made up of healthy people. So we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of each other, because together we can ride a whole family of crocodiles, or at least steal a car.